Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, this is Big Mac's Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge and this is the paint palette tutorial. It's not a full length tutorial. What we've done is we broke down the video into 6 different sections so we can do 6 different versions of something. Example, leather, metallics, and you can get a good look at 6 different ways of doing things so you can find the colour for your army a lot faster than going through loads and loads of tutorials. So in a minute there's going to be 6 different images with timestamps so you can find the bit of the video that you want, and as this is not a normal layout of tutorial, I may not see you at the end, although I will be summarising everything at the end. So if I don't see you at the end, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, share with your friends and leave a comment if you want to request any more paint palette videos. So here are your images guys, with rough timestamps. They may be altered ever so slightly during the editing process. So we've got a fair few here. We've got some nice yellow leathers, orange leathers, we've got some red leathers, some brown, tanned leathers, some just weathered leathers. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to crack on with some leathers. Doesn't have to specifically be used on boots, it can be used on anything. And this is the very first one. Obviously all this footage is sped up because you don't want to watch me paint this for longer than you need to. So we got Rhinox Hide by Games Workshop over a Vallejo Black Primer. Now they're all primed in Vallejo Black Primer to start off with. It's something we use quite a lot. But we just want a nice even coat of Rhinox Hide there. So probably give that 2 coats and 2 or 3, but I'm just going to rush through these, so don't expect the best paint quality ever. Then we're going to start highlighting that with Dryad Bark. We're going to go over all those raised areas. And you'll see me using different techniques here. Sometimes I'm glazing it on, other times I'm just feathering it in. But you can get away with a lot of feathering, and that is putting the brush on there, putting the paint on there, and then just smudging it around. You can get away with that a lot when doing leather. It just adds to a sort of streaky, weathered look. Also looks like scuff marks and everything else, but obviously you want to make sure your paint's nice and thin while you're doing this, otherwise you just end up with lumps on it, and that's not something that you're going to want. Next we're going to add a bit of Gawthor Brown into the Dryad Bark. Focus primarily on the top edges of things, anything that really stands out a lot. So it's basically an edge highlight, and then I'm just feathering back into the rest of the shape. So I'm doing the outer edges, feather back inwards. I'm building this up ever so slightly. Obviously you want to hit all the places where the light will hit, which is usually the toes, the raised bits. Because we're doing boots at least anyway, that's where those parts will be. You can use these leathers for any leather you want to do really. It's just a nice quick and easy video showing you how to do different effects on different leathers. Now we're going to water down some Agrax Earthshade. I think this is about a 50-50 mix, but looking about the application it's probably a little bit more water. I've started taking to using airbrush thinners because the water from our taps, there's something in the water that when it dries gives us a very patchy look, and it also dries in the recesses. We get these little white bits, so I'm not using that, I'm just using thinner from now on. After that we're going to go back to our Gawthor Brown and Dryad Bark mix, but we're going to add a little bit more Gawthor Brown at this time. But because we've washed the other colours, they're going to blend together much smoother, and now we're just redoing that and bringing out the highlights at the top areas again. I tend to use washers as a way of getting rid of anything that didn't blend quite so well. It does help put a filter over it and just transition the two things together. Next is straight Gawthor Brown on its own, and as you can see I'm starting to work further and further towards the highlight areas and leave some of the other stuff now, which means I actually get faster at painting these the further into it I go, because I don't need to cover everything with this particular paint. That's just my style of painting. You don't have to do it that way, you can go over all the other bits if you want, which is more of the Games Workshop way of just re-highlighting everything. But I prefer my light to be in a particular spot. Now we're going to add Rakarth Flesh into the Gawthor Brown, and this is to lighten it up even further, because when light hits leather, it doesn't make it brighter, it just dilutes the colour. So what we're doing is we're taking some of the colour out of the leather now. As you can see there, it starts to look more diluted where the light will hit it. And there's really not that much to this one. As you can see, just picking out the very edges of those, the front of the toes there, or where the toes would be even. And that's pretty much that one done. You can obviously put another wash on there if you want, and then go to pure raccoon flesh if you wanted as well, just to bring it up even further. But that's all you do at that point, is you just start diluting the colours out a little bit more here and there until your very fine points of your boots where you want the most light is most pronounced. So here is the second one, and we're going to start with Mournfang Brown, and that is by Games Workshop if you didn't know that already. And we're going to give a nice base coat to both of these boots. Like I said in the other video, you can use these colours for the leathers on any type of leather that you want to use. I just happen to have 6 of these models around, so I decided to use the boots from these. Next up, we're going to mix a bit of Games Workshop XV88 into the Mournfang. And we're going to cover most of that top part of the boot. The reason I do the top part of the boot like that is because it will shade the underneath. Whatever it's overlapping, that's where the shadow will be. So I just highlight that one the most. I tend to pick out the toes on the boots first as well, as they will be the brightest. It gives you a good idea of where your colour's going and what kind of colour you're going to get. And don't forget, this looks quite yellow. It's going to dry a little bit darker. So once we've got that on there, we're just going to use a straight XV88, and we're going to keep working towards those top edges. And already you can see we're starting to get a bit of a deserty tanned leather. I don't know if tanned would be the right word for this, but yeah, we're going for a much more yellow dusty leather here, something more weathered. Well, the application is pretty simple. A lot of the time I'm just putting that on and then feathering it, because that does help with doing leather. Now we're going to use Army Painter Strong Tone. The reason we're using that instead of Agrax Earthshade is because I wanted to keep the warm tint away from these. I wanted them just dirty and scuffed, rather than if you put Agrax Earthshade on, it's got a bit of a red hue to it. So I went for the Army Painter Strong Tone instead. And that's put on there quite generously, and it's going to start bringing out all those shaded areas. And it's also going to blend those colours together that we've put on. Next, I'm going to go back to the XV88 and pick up the edges again, seeing as they've been really toned down. You will notice that this is a little bit shiny. That's because I dried them quickly with a hairdryer. And when I tend to do that with the strong tone, it does make a skin on there. It just dries with a more of a gloss finish. So when I'm off camera, I'll put a bit of matte on there as well, a bit of matte varnish, and that'll sort that right back out. Next, we're going to use XV88 again, but we're going to add Scale 75's Iroko, and we're going to mix that up. It's about 50-50 for most of these, tends to be how I do it. And what this is going to do, as Iroko is a bit more of a pale colour, a bit more pastel-y, is it's going to dilute the colour where the light would hit, which is what you want for your leather boots. You don't want your colour to get brighter. You want the colour to get brighter when it's something like energy coils or Necron weapons. This, we're just trying to take the colour out where the light hits. Next, we're just going to use Scale 75's Iroko on its own, and I always pick out both sides where the toes would be, just to make the boots look a little bit more three-dimensional. But in that case there, as you can see, I've gone straight over the cap of the boot as well. And this is basically just an edge highlight on the top sections, but because we put an Iroko and XV88 on there before, it will blend quite nicely. Obviously I'm doing these really rushed because it's just about the colour combinations that you want to get the result that you want. And there we have some very dusty leather boots. Now, like I said, it did end up with a bit of a gloss finish. I did put a matte on there. I could probably use another matte. But colour wise, I could see orcs wearing these, any orcs based in the desert, or you could use this on, like I said, any leather pouches from librarians or anything else. And that one's pretty simple. Next, this is number 3 and we're going for a reddish leather. We're going to start with Burnt Red by Model Colour. Now, Model Colour does give a decent coverage. It's quite a thick paint. But I recommend putting it on in 2 layers. But like I've said in all the other ones here, I'm just rushing through these because it's not about the quality of the paint, it's about the combinations of paint to get a certain colour. And that's the point of the paint palette videos. Now we're going to add Model Air Rust into the Model Colour Burnt Red. This is going to give us more of a fleshy tone. It's a bit like a Tusker Fur from Games Workshop. But instead of using a completely different brand of paint, I wanted to blend both of these together. So I knew I had the burnt red tone to it already. After that, we're going to use Model Air Rust on its own, which is a colour I don't get to use very often. And we're going again for the edges here. We're just going to start working further and further away from the dark areas to the light areas. Like I said on the other ones, I tend to start on the toes of the boots and the top of the boots to get a good feel for how that colour is going to look. And like I said in the other ones, I tend to do a hard line and then feather it out when it comes to leather boots. It's a nice, quick and easy way of doing things. Now we're going to use Army Painter Red Shade, which, as you can see, is a quite a vibrant red. But we will fix that in a minute, as it's obviously made the shaded areas much brighter than they needed to be. But it definitely tones all those colours that we put down to a worn down reddish leather. Yeah, I was quite happy with the colour for that, so I decided to throw on a null oil just to sort out the shaded areas where the red had just become a little bit too red. And this really does start to sort out the shading. After that, I'm going to use Model Air Rust again, but I'm going to add Games Workshop's Rakarth Flesh into it. And as you can see, I'm just using that again to just dilute the top areas where the light would hit and just feather those out. And this particular colour, looking at it, is something I can see most fantasy models wearing. Particularly anything that's woodland based. That sort of colour against greens would look really good on a model. Obviously these are the basic versions. We can go up much further if you want to, and then just go to a pure Rakarth Flesh and just keep going up if you want to. But I was quite happy. That's a nice quick and easy result there for some reddish leather boots. You can always add more to these if that's what you want to do. You just keep going further up and then washing down and then keep going further up. But when it comes to leather, I tend to keep going up to Rakarth Flesh just to dilute the colours. Right, we're on to number 4. This one in my notes is labelled as an Orky Desert Boots, so I'm not quite sure which one this one is, but we are going to start with a Mournfang Brown by Games Workshop. I do believe this one's a little bit more orangey than the dusty ones we did previously. And once we've got a Mournfang Brown on there, we're going to use Deathclaw Brown by Games Workshop. Because I think the Deathclaw Brown's a pretty good colour to make a bit of an orangey sort of coloured boot. We do like to make the paint palettes have a bit of a variety, but also a bit of a theme. So you've got 3 yellow tan sort of boots in different oranges, and then we've got 3 of the more leather based ones that look more like a natural cowhide leather. Next we're going to add Requiem Flesh Shade with no water. We're going to try and make sure this doesn't pool up too much, but Requiem Flesh Shade is definitely the colour we want for this. It really tones those colours and puts some life into them. Whereas the previous set of colours that we did for something similar to this were they were based on being very dusty and pale. Then we're going to go back over all the edges and start bringing up all those details using the Deathclaw Brown again. You may wonder why do Deathclaw Brown then the wash. Well, that wash has really toned all those colours, and now the Deathclaw Brown will stand out quite a lot against it. Do kind of like the result of that. It's a good colour that I don't get to use very often, as well as Deathclaw Brown. Now we're going to use Deathclaw Brown by Games Workshop and add some game colour, Elf Skin Tone. Now, Elf Skin Tone's again, it's a very pastely sort of colour. When working with leathers, I start with the base and then I start filtering them out so the highlight areas are just muted more than anything. But if you mute it too much, you can always just go back over with a wash to just enrich those colours a little bit more. And after that, we're going to use Elf Skin Tone on its own. As you can see, that really starts to brighten those up, but we've still got a very nice orange underneath, nice warm colour in contrast to the paleness that we've put on the top of it. And as that does seem quite bright, what we're going to do now is we're going to use a Seraphim Sepia, and this is a Army Painter or a Vallejo wash again, I think. And just tone those down ever so slightly. Like I said, you can go up, come back down, and all you're doing is just blending the colours that you've put on in with the rest of them, so they look a little bit smoother. The paint jobs here are not superb, they're just quickly rushed together to show you how to get these colours. And then to finish off, as you can see all those colours are showing through there, we're just going to do a final highlight with the Elf Skin Tone. So we've got a sort of dusty desert boot, but it's a lot more warm than the previous one. And like I said in all the other ones, I tend to do the top of the boot and the toes as one of the main highlight points. And there you go. They don't take very long to do, and that's generally the result. Again, it's very similar to the other one, but done with a completely different set of paints and a slightly different result. And that's why we make the paint palette videos. There's so many combinations that we're just going to keep working on these and keep coming out with more things so you can find the colour scheme you want for all your bits and pieces for your armies. Right, number 5. We're going to start this with a scale 75 red leather. Now scale 75 spread and glaze really, really well, so you're probably going to need to put 3 coats or more on these boots, as they are quite thin airbrush paints, but they can be applied with a brush as well. We're going to go for a full coverage of that, and again it's a Vallejo black primer that we're painting over. I mean, the red leather is clearly meant for painting leather, so it would have been weird to miss that one in this video. Now we're going to use red leather plus walnut, and they're both scale 75. Basically the idea here is to start getting that walnut to show through on those highlights and just already start fading out the main colours. Like I said on the other bits of video, you can use these leather techniques for anything you want to paint leather. Once we've done that, we're going to use Nagrax Earthshade, and it's going to be watered down because we really just want it to sit mainly in those recesses, just to add some contrast to that red leather, because we brought it up. Now if we bring the whole lot down, we're going to tone down the walnut as well, but it's going to make the transitions a little bit smoother. Then we're going to use red leather and walnut again, but now we're going to add a little bit more walnut into there just to take away that colour. And at this point I am actually liking the design there. It looks pretty decent. There's so many ways of doing these different leathers as well. I could have just been doing these all day. Next up, we're just going to use walnut on its own. As you can see, leaving the shades there in the recesses and just bringing up these few little colours is really starting to make those boots look worn. The highlighting process, again, it's the same for all of them. I'll just do the top of the boot there and the toe. That flap that goes over the top of the boot is one of the parts I'll highlight the most. I think this is just This is Gothor Brown by Games Workshop added into the red leather and walnut mix. And that's just because the Gothor Brown is a very similar colour, but it's not too dissimilar, so I can blend that in very subtly. Again, these are not immaculate paint jobs, these are just colour schemes that I'm mucking about with, and that's the point of these paint palette videos. Next is to add a little bit of Rakarth flesh now into the previous mix of Gothor, red leather and walnut, and you can just start taking that as high up as you want to go. Just do a layer with Rakarth flesh in it, let that dry, add a little bit more Rakarth flesh, and since you've got your base on there with those colours, you can just keep going further and further up, because we want to dilute the light sources rather than brighten them up. Unless you wanted to do a shiny leather, which is not something I've done in this video. And there you have it. You can put another wash on there if you want to put another wash on there. I didn't feel the need at the time as it's a quick one, but you could put another wash on there. And like I said, just keep adding a bit more Rakarth flesh and highlighting up the parts that you want to highlight up. Finally, number 6. There's really not that much to this one either. As if you've watched the whole video, you'll know the processes here are pretty simple. We're going to use Mournfang Brown by Games Workshop, because we're going back to a sort of deserty colour. We're going to want a nice solid base of that. So probably 2 coats. Now this is Cokun Copper. Cokun Copper by scale 75. We're going to cover most of the Mournfang Brown. The Mournfang's just a nice base to work over, because you can't paint yellowy colours straight over black. But also that Mournfang's going to help with the blending later on. It's going to show through ever so slightly. Next we're going to use Peanut Butter by scale 75, which is a much more yellow colour than the Cokun Copper. As you can see, we're highlighting on all those same places again. The top part of the boot where it folds over, we'll be doing the toes, or the toe area, the cap of the boot, and a few of the underneath parts just on the folds. Now we're going to put in Reclin Flesh Shade as a pure wash. We're not even going to water this one down. And that's just going to tone all those colours for us. It's basically the first shade and first bit of colour we've put on, seeing as we've only really put the coconut butter and Cokun Copper on. It's really going to blend those 2 colours together. Now we're going to use the peanut butter plus Iroko by scale 75, or Rico. I'm not sure quite how that's pronounced. As you can see, that Reclin Flesh Shade really blended all those colours back together nicely. So we're going to bring up those bright yellows again using that Iroko and peanut butter mix. Because I thought the peanut butter itself was a little bit too yellow, but it did work for an undertone. Next up we're going to use pure Iroko. I'm going to start on the edges of the caps of the boots again, just to see how bright that is, and then start on the most highlighted areas. That way if it's too bright you can always come back down. And as I said in all the other ones, I'm not trying to do a great paint job here. I'm just rushing through these to make the paint palette video. It's all about what colours we're using. As you can see, that does make a good colour transition and makes things look nice, 3-dimensional and very natural. Next it's Reclin Flesh Shade again, but this time it's watered down. We don't want to keep flooding these shadows with that. We're just trying to blend in the Iroko that we just did. So you want to make sure that you at least hit all the sources that you've just done. And don't put too much on so it pulls and really darkens the recesses again. And then again, I'm going straight back to Iroko, just to pick them up a little bit more, because those layers of Reclin Flesh Shade are just toning things ever so slightly as a filter. And there's only one more set of colours after this one. And that will be Rakarth Flesh and Iroko. It's up to you, the combination of the mix. When you're mixing it up, just have a look at what you've got. Remember, it always does dry a little bit darker. Again, same highlights. Tops of the boots where the folds are, bringing up the caps of the boots as well. And a few odd places. If you really want to, you can glaze these in and blend them in nicely, but I didn't see it that necessary. And there we go. That's just another version, and if you skip through the video and look at the end results of all those, which I'll try and show you in a second now, all those yellow tones are slightly different shades of brown, yellows, although they are very similar. Just having a quick run through here. Yeah, I do apologise for the photo quality of the boots. The video quality does seem to be a lot better. So when I put these side by side, you can see they are similar, but they're all ever so slightly different. I do like these red boots. I can definitely see those on some fantasy elves or something. And then on to the more yellow leathers. I believe that would be the dusty one that we started with. You could always dry brush a lot of the last layers on as well. That would also work. I just don't like dry brushing. Then we've got the middle one there with a bit more colour to it. Then the last one, which is a bit more orange, which again, I can see fantasy players using this colour scheme quite a bit. So yeah, they all do look very similar, but all the tones and stuff are completely different. I could probably do another set of this. And here we have all 6 of them on the Lazy Susan, just so you can compare them while I do my outro. So first of all, thanks very much for watching. Also, if you like the idea of the paint palette videos, do hit like and leave a comment, because we're looking for more ideas, for more things to do, and we want to keep doing these so people can find what they're looking for paint wise, because it's a pain trying to figure out what you want to paint your army like and you keep changing it. So we're hoping the paint palette system will help people out with that. So what can I say? Thanks for watching. I hope you did enjoy this one, guys. We have some thank yous to give out. Firstly, let me give a special thank you to Athol, because he sent us these Chaos Warriors, and that's what we used for the video. And we'll probably be doing another one with the Chaos Warriors where we'll be doing different armors, including a cold set of metals and a bright warm set of metals as well. So we're going to get good use out of these. And a special thank you to our patrons who help support this channel as well. We have the Orc Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, Warren, D. White, Kit Lindquist, Agnes of Dawn, Mark and Dave. You guys are our top paying patrons. You are awesome. Your support helps us buy more models for more tutorials and more odds and ends, and with no end, it's been helping the studio out the whole time. And the last bit of advertisement, you want to get yourself some models to muck about with, go check out the Outpost where you can get 15 to 20% off. The link is in the description. That's our affiliate link. So when you buy stuff through that link, we get store credit and it costs you nothing extra. It just gives us another way of getting more funding for the studio. And that's all from us. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one.